So why is it that you sometimes become more painfully attached to what you're trying to manifest whenever you start doing a routine? You start affirming more, you start, sticking to your mental diet, you're trying to stay very positive, you're trying to stay very focused on, being what you want and having what you want. But for some reason, whenever you try to do that, you start going into suffering. You start noticing even more that you don't have it. So today I'm going to talk about this because this is a big issue that actually affects so many people. And again, it's one of those other topics that I feel like isn't often talked about on YouTube. So we're going to talk about how to healthfully stay detached when you are manifesting someone or something, when you're sticking to your routine. How can you stick to the routine and at the same time not go into suffering, not go into over obsession or over attachment and over noticing that you don't have what you want yet? And before we get deeper into that, I will introduce myself to those of you who are new. If this is the first video of mine that you're clicking on, my name is Genevieve. I am a manifestation coach. I mainly talk about law of assumption and some other somatic things, emotional things that I found to be very supportive of law of assumption work, because law of assumption is really about your identity, like changing your assumptions. For a lot of us, assumptions are really tied to our identity. So if we're changing our I am, especially with really big things like relationships, where a lot of our identity is tied up in relationships, we're going to hit on some emotional things. So anyway, so there's somatic things I sometimes talk about that will complement law of assumption, but that's kind of my deal. In the description below, I have links to, at the time of me publishing this, 2 courses. One is a 31-day self-concept course. The other one is a 21-day master course in manifesting your specific person. Recently, it's so cool. I've been getting flooded with so much amazing positive feedback from people that have finished the self-concept course, and it is like, oh my God, like the things people are saying, people that have really gone through every day and done the 31 days have just experienced such amazing shifts. And both of my courses, I'll say, are not typical like other courses you might get where it's just sort of superficial, like, oh, here's some affirmations and just say those. I go really in depth into some of the issues that people come up against when they're doing this kind of work. So yeah, so especially if you are struggling with the topic of this video about detachment, about how do I affirm for what I want without getting too obsessed with what I want, the self-concept course especially is going to help you. But also the SP course, I definitely go deep into that too, because that's where I found this affects people the most, is when they're manifesting a specific person that they're romantically obviously manifesting, or love in general. That's where this can be triggered, this kind of obsession and this suffering that comes with the obsession. So so those are below. I also have a link to do coaching if you want to talk to me one-on-one. I've also got a meditation for manifesting a male SP. I've got an ASMR channel, so lots of random stuff down there. So please look into that if you want to do deeper work with me. But now let's get deeper into this topic. So this video is actually inspired by a question that I got on my last video. The video that was published just before this, I talked about codependency. I talked about how over-attachment tends to be the only thing, honestly, like the only thing that I've seen really stop a manifestation is over-attachment, codependency. If you've got that being a really dominant energy in your manifestation, it tends to not work. So go watch that video if you want to hear more about that. But someone in the comments asked a really good question. I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad someone asked this, because I actually hear clients talk about this scenario a lot. And it's also, again, it's not, like I said before, not very addressed. So the question was, she was saying something like, whenever I start really affirming for my person, I really, because what she was describing is that she would go through phases, and this is what's so common. People will go through phases of affirming, seeing that nothing is changing, getting into a lot of suffering and attachment because you're like, I've been doing all my work, I've been doing all my affirming, but I'm really noticing now that like it's not here. And so because they're in so much suffering, they then go into a phase of just like, well, whatever, I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to not affirm. I'm just going to do something else because it's too painful to affirm because it's not coming. And then they get tired of that, and then they go back into affirming. And so they go back and forth between like, I'm just going to surrender and do nothing. And then they think, well, I should be affirming. And then they go back to affirming. And then they get, again, really fixated and over obsessed. And then they go back to surrendering. And so she was describing, my interpretation of her comment was something like that whenever she kind of comes out of her, like, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to like be surrendered and do nothing, and maybe it'll happen. And then she goes into affirming, she gets way too attached. She starts noticing the 3D more. She starts feeling like she's kind of aware of how much it's not here because she's thinking about it so much. She's affirming about it so often that it makes her notice even more that it's not here. So if that kind of cycle has happened to you before, you are so not alone. That is extremely common. And so today I just want to answer this question because one, it is important that you do have something that you're grounding yourself in. Like if you are manifesting a totally different relationship, a totally different dynamic with a specific person, or if you're manifesting love or anything important to you, it doesn't have to be a person, but anything that's important to you, if you're right now, your current reality is a really different place than the place that you're going in your new state and with your new manifestation, it is important to do some sort of practice to help you shift into that state. Because if for a lot of people, if they just kind of do nothing and kind of hope that, well, if I just watch enough YouTube videos or whatever, I'll just learn everything by osmosis and I'll just randomly shift on my own, and then maybe everything will just randomly work out for me, but that typically isn't what happens. You do need to have some sort of practice, because this is also a reminder, this is a spiritual practice, like, and that means that we do stuff. It doesn't mean that like it's about the stuff we do and that's what's confusing. It's not the technique that's like magic, but we stick to some sort of a routine for us to facilitate for ourselves space so that we can shift in hopefully the right way. So I don't want you to go full like, well, let's not do anything because I don't want to focus on this at all. It causes me too much pain to affirm for my SP because I just noticed they're not here. That approach isn't going to work. That's just going to keep you in like purgatory or something. So you do need to do something, but I want you to do whatever you're choosing to do. And I'm not the kind of coach that's going to tell you like you have to do this way, you have to like do, you know, this amount of affirmations or this technique. I'm not. There's so many techniques that can help different people at different times. The technique itself doesn't matter, but I do want you to find something, whether it's affirmations or meditating or sats or scripting or whatever, something that you can stick to every day that you do to help you to saturate in your new experience, in your new reality, in your knowing that you already have it, because you're doing these techniques to sink into your subconscious. You're not just saying them in your ego mind just as like a fun thing to say because your ego wants to say it. You're saying it with the powerful intention of, this is who I am, and I'm reminding myself of it so that it sinks even deeper into my subconscious. It becomes even more normal to my subconscious that I am this and that I have this. So you do need to do something, but I want you to be very boundaried about it, because I wonder if this is part of the problem, is that sometimes people confuse being in the wish fulfilled with like spending their entire day almost in like fantasy. And I have another video where I talk about that, the difference between like fantasy and actual visualization that manifests. So sometimes people think like, oh, I'm in the wish fulfilled because I'm spending my entire day sort of in this like dissociative love state where I'm just like pretending I'm with my SP all day. That's a little bit boundaryless, and it's not honoring to yourself. It's also a little bit resistant to the current 3D. Another thing about this is that we are never making our entire lives about any manifestation. A really big Neville Goddard quote that I love, that I reference a lot, is the quote where he says, "We do not worship the creations, we worship the creator." And what that really means is we are never worshiping any manifestation. We're not worshiping our SP. We're not worshiping the money. We're not worshiping having an amazing nose or an amazing body. We're not looking to any manifestation as if it's gonna save us, as if that's the thing, like that's the fulfillment. Like once I get the creation, that will be the ticket. And I talk about that a lot because it's very important, and it's so clear that a lot of people are accidentally trying to manifest that way, and that's why shit doesn't work out for them. Excuse my French. We as manifestors are worshiping the creator. And who's the creator? Obviously in my reality, it's me, and in your reality, it is obviously you. So you are never, this is why we say you don't put your SP on a pedestal, you don't put a manifestation on a pedestal. You are living your life, you're being present in the moment, you're being non-resistant to the 3D moment as you go about your day, and you're not trying to escape your reality by constantly comforting yourself with the image of your SP's love, or trying to soothe yourself because you're like, oh, but I have the wish fulfilled, so at least I have that, so I'll just go within that, and that's good. That's not a good way to manifest. So when I say I want you to be very boundaried about your practice, I mean like have 2 times a day, or maybe 3 times a day, like a morning, afternoon, evening, but typically like 2 times a day is enough. But it depends. If it's a really big shift and you do want to put some extra focus on it, it's fine to have 3 times a day. But 2 or 3 times a day that you're going into your boundaried saturation time. And it's like, okay, I'm going in, I'm going to do my affirmations, or I'm going to do my sats or my visualization or whatever it is. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do the technique. And once that's done, as I said, you're just going to go back to living your life. And if you do think of your SP or your manifestation in any way, if it comes up, because it's normal, especially if it's a really important thing to you, yeah, you might think of it at some other part of your day, but I want you to interact with the thought of it from the dynamic of the person who is so detached, because it's like, I so already have that. Like I don't, because that's truly, like that's how you know you've shifted states. Like the people, I actually talked to a client today and I was talking about this. The people who really are successful, especially at manifesting SPs, but honestly it's manifesting anything, is you really get into the state where I don't know how else to call it except detachment, where you're just like, I just feel good. Like I'm not really looking for it. I don't really need it. I just am living my life feeling good, and I'm not worried. I'm just not. So I want you to practice being that version of you whenever your manifestation comes into your mind. And just to be more specific, so let's say it's a specific person. Like say your specific person comes to your mind, I want you to say something to yourself like, I don't even need to think about that because they are obsessed with me, or they are the ones manifesting me. I'm not the one that like thinks about them. They're the one that thinks about me. I'm the one being pursued. So I hope you're picking up on what I'm saying in terms of a dynamic shift, because when you're in the thing I said before, where you're trying to force yourself or escape your reality through always being in this like loving, exalted, like, oh, I'm just going to always be in my perfect love for my SP, you're in a dynamic of really obsessing over them and really kind of energetically chasing them, and also making them kind of your everything. Like again, like your entire identity is kind of hinged on them picking you, and you don't really have anything else in your life to comfort you except the thought of them. Like that's way too much power you've projected onto them, way too much wounding, honestly, that you've projected onto them. And it's very hard to manifest a person or anything when you are regarding them from that kind of this like exalted state. So I want you to practice detachment. And what that means is like practice regarding them the way that you would regard anyone that you know is really in love with you, that you don't really even need to worry about, because that's also how your relationship, if we're still talking about the example of a relationship, that's how your relationship will feel. Like when you're in a secure relationship with someone, you're not obsessing over them all day. You're not like fantasizing about them all day. You're not, I mean, of course you're gonna sometimes do that, but like it's in a more normal way. It's not like you're spending your entire day just like, oh my God, they're just everything, and they're the moon and the stars, and they're all I have. And I mean, what I just said there was dramatic, but like you're just not doing that. When you're in a normal relationship, you just accept that they really love you. You're in a natural, just living your life, in a natural detachment. I wish I had a better word than detachment, because I know that word like triggers people, because they think that detachment means detaching from the desire, and that's not what I mean. It simply means detaching from the obsession, detaching from thinking you need to do anything, detaching from the reality where you don't have it. That's what it really means. Detaching from the reality where you're obsessing about it because you don't have it. Because again, if you really did know you had it, you wouldn't be that interested, honestly. And again, I know that sounds weird, but I don't know how to describe it. When I've had this in my own life, when I've switched into that state, that's just what it feels like. It feels like it's almost like I don't care anymore, but at the same time I do. See, this is why it's hard to explain, but it really is almost like you're just doing good. You're just not even worried about them. You know that they're doing their thing. You're also not trying to control them. That's another huge thing, which leads me into my next tip that I would like to give you for detaching. Because just to run a recap, I do want you to do some sort of routine, because you're not just going to magically change this relationship dynamic by doing nothing and just kind of avoiding. Because if you're fearfully avoiding manifestation techniques because you don't want them to make you upset and make you notice that you don't have it, that's not working. So I do want you to do something in which you're practicing some sort of a balance of having a healthy practice. But here's another thing that is so important, especially if you are triggered by the whole like noticing that they're not here in the 3D, or noticing that whatever it is that you want isn't here in the 3D. Another thing that Neville Goddard talks about is non-resistance to the 3D. He really goes on about that. There's nothing you can do in the 3D. This is all about your inner state, who you really think you are, what you really think you can have. And the more you are checking the 3D, the more you're obsessing about the 3D, the more you are just, you know, really in it about thinking that it's the 3D that's going to give it to you, not yourself, not your own practice of having it. The 3D doesn't give you anything. So if you're really in that, I want you to practice giving your full approval to the 3D. And this is another thing that I talked about with a client today. And what I said to her was like, I feel like whenever I talk about what I'm about to tell you, people's heads just start rolling because they just cannot handle it, because it triggers them. But there's something, again, there's so many paradoxes in manifesting, and this is a big one. But there's something about when you truly, not just accept, but I'm going to up it from acceptance to approval. When you approve of your SP doing whatever the heck they're doing, like if they're ignoring you, approve of them ignoring you. Don't make it mean anything bad about you. You're in so much acceptance and approval of whatever they're doing. Even if they're choosing a third party, you are just in so much, yep, they can do whatever they need to do right now. I don't care. I give them full approval. They can do whatever they want to do. If he wants to ignore me, that's okay. If she wants to flip me off, that's okay. I fully approve of whatever she wants to do. When you give someone or something your full approval, like unconditional approval, that nothing they could do would ever bother you. You don't need to control them, because you are just like, nothing you could do would bother me. I have unconditional love and approval for you. People just tend to run towards you when they can feel you're giving them genuine approval, that you're not trying to control them, you're not trying to codependently get them to love you. When they feel that you're no longer in that, and you're just in total like, yep, I don't even need to control you. You do you, whatever you want to do. I genuinely don't care. I don't mind. I totally approve of it. You do you. People just, they can't help but come towards you. So I say this because a lot of you are noticing the 3D, noticing and not approving of, well, why haven't they texted me yet? Why am I still blocked? Why are they still with the third party? And these are all like total resistant thought. These are total like, don't approve. This isn't supposed to be happening. This isn't what I asked for. And of course, when you really notice that stuff and you're really fixated on that stuff, of course, it pulls you back into, I don't have it, and they're not doing what I want them to do, and what the heck, maybe this doesn't even work, and you're spiraling and all that craziness again. So when you, again, give someone your full approval, and again, I get it's paradoxical because it's like, well, why would I approve of them being with the third party? Because then they're just going to stay with the third party. That doesn't typically happen, because you're approving of them and you're internally knowing, I'm the God of my reality, so I can totally approve of them, and I can internally practice giving myself in a responsible way the experience I want to have. So it's like the two are seemingly maybe to your ego mind conflicting, but actually it's such a healthy way to practice this, where and it helps you to be so non-resistant, so just accepting of the 3D, and you are still practicing your power of like, I'm the operant power, and I'm going to decide my experience. Again, I don't care what they're doing. They can do whatever the heck they want, and eventually they're going to catch up. I can't control them. They can do whatever they want. Total approval, have fun, do what you want to do, even be mean to me. I don't even care. You have no power over me, 3D. I'm going to go within and give myself the experience that I want to have. That's such a healthy mindset, because it brings it back to, this is a you on you thing. Like, all manifestation is never about the people. It's never about the things. It's never about the physical people, places, or things we're trying to manifest. This is a relationship you're building with yourself. You're building your own capacity of what you think you can have, what you can assume about yourself. Again, who do you really think you are? And if you really know that you're the operant power, that no one can reject you because you're the only one that would ever agree to rejection ever meaning anything, you can approve of everyone because you're like, these are all just whatever. Like, I'm the one that decides my experience no matter what they're doing. So I'm not dependent on their behavior. I'm not dependent on their behavior for me to know that I'm so loved, that I'm so respected. And again, this is paradoxical, and the more you come into that kind of genuine attitude, that is when people start like running towards you, because you are so, that's real power right there. When you are genuinely so approving because you genuinely feel like nothing is a threat to you. So those are my tips for today in terms of how to practice detachment, because I really want you guys, because again, it's so common, as I said, I've heard this happen so many times, where you go back and forth between like, okay, I'm gonna be good, I'm gonna do my good manifesting routine and affirm all the time and be in the wish fulfilled all the time and be so positive and love all the time, and then you get burned out on that because you're not seeing anything, and it's usually like it's been like a week or two, like for a lot of you, if you're being honest, like you're not even doing, maybe for some of you it's only like a few days that you know, and then you give up. But you do that, you get triggered because you get more obsessed with the 3D and you're checking it and you're disapproving of it, and then you fall out of it because you're like, screw it, I'm just gonna surrender and do nothing, and then the cycle just keeps repeating itself. So I want you to stick to your routine regardless of what the 3D ever does or doesn't do for you, but stick to a reasonable, again, like a morning thing and a night thing. It doesn't even have to be that much. It could be 10-15 minutes. Doesn't need to be a ton of stuff, but you're sticking to your boundary routine. The rest of the day you're practicing being in the dynamic of, oh yeah, I'm not the one manifesting them, they're manifesting me, or I'm not the one who needs money, like money is chasing me, like money is like working so hard to find me, or whatever it is that you are manifesting. And you're practicing that dynamic, and then you're also sending total approval to the 3D of like, do what you want to do, 3D. Even if you want to do something that I used to interpret as rejection or something like that, I give it total approval, unconditional love. Nothing in the 3D is a threat to me. So practice that as well. So that is what I got for you today. Let me know your thoughts and questions in the comments below, and I will see you very soon in my next video. All right, bye.